My name's James Locke and I'm an entrepreneur from Liverpool. I'm also a director in the Zinzino business. So during the pandemic, when Dr. Colin Neil Parsley asked me to look at a business because they were using the blood test and the product range alongside elite sports people, I was really interested to know more. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Col, and he's going to talk to you more about life, nutrition and Zinzino. Over to you, Col.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name's Colin Robertson. I'm an exercise and nutrition scientist. I spend my time really working everything between helping people recover from being in hospital, so from clinical rehabilitation and clinical physiology, right the way across to helping athletes prepare for the Olympic Games, working with international rugby teams, football teams, people who are climbing Everest, rowing across the ocean, whatever it is really. I'm an environmental physiologist. If you look at the strict discipline of what I do, so if someone's going to do something crazy or attempt something crazy at altitude, if it's hot or cold or high, they get me involved to make sure they don't die. I didn't realize until now that that rhymes, but that's what I do. So I prepare them to go in those environments and I look after all the nutrition in their training and in their participation. But my real kind of focus in the world is looking at general population and looking at health and how we can improve health across a population by empowering people to make better choices. So I'm part of the research team with Greater Manchester Health Innovations, which is one of the biggest health research projects, certainly in Europe, and one of the ones in the world. I'm a member of the Cheshire Active Task Force, where all across our county, we try and enable people to better engage with physical activity and make better health choices. I'm a director of the UTS Foundation on the Wirral, which is specifically aimed towards supporting people who've had or have cancer and giving them free access ongoing to exercise support, rehabilitation and nutritional guidance and input and everything else. So spend most of my time working on those projects. I'm currently working on a huge project with regards to UK Active in preparing the workforce, the health and fitness industry all across the UK and Northern Ireland for coping post-COVID-19. So what does that industry do, excuse me, when someone who's had COVID-19 shows up and says, I want to get back to exercise or I want to exercise for the first time. So I'm involved in lots and lots of different kind of projects that are more health centric and trying to help people across the general population. And that's really what I'm about. I see a big part of my role really is saving people from fads. I can't stand fad diets, quick fixes, fake science. I can't stand any of that. I spend most of my time working in scientific laboratories. I'm actually ahead of the Queen's Laboratory, which is a genetics laboratory in Greater Manchester. You know, I'm very much driven by science. I'm a peer-reviewed researcher myself. I sit on the board of peer-reviewed publications to check that the work is coming through. I have 7 PhD students of my own. So I'm very much focused on the real deal. So when it comes to nutrition, which is probably the one that takes up most of my time these days, to be honest with you. I've typically been down the middle with regards to physical activity, exercise, strength and conditioning, getting people fit and ready, and nutrition. But actually, nutrition is taken more and more because the fact is you are what you eat. And no matter how well you exercise or train, if your diet is terrible, you'll look like your diet, no matter what box jumps or bench presses you can do in the gym. That's just a fact. And also when it comes to your health, one of the biggest indicators to your likelihood to developing a chronic illness or disease is literally how much you move, not exercise, just movement, and what you eat. So it's a huge issue and it's becoming ever more of an issue and more people are getting switched onto it. So really, a couple of months ago, it's more than that now, I was sat at my desk doing some work on epigenetics. Epigenetics, for anyone who doesn't know, is where we look at how the food we eat changes our gene expression and with regards to repairing and remodeling our DNA. And actually, when we get it right, it makes us better humans that are more resilient and robust, and we're less likely to get diseases and illnesses. And when things like COVID-19 come along, our immune system's better intact and we can fend it off better. And when we make bad choices, which the vast majority of our population do. It's what we leave ourselves susceptible to and what's going to come our way, what compromises we're making. So for instance, 56% of the average UK diet is made up of ultra-processed foods. Those processed foods damage you on contact. They damage the gut biome, which is this internal environment within the stomach that is as complex, if not more complex, than a tropical rainforest. And we damage the gut bacteria, the gut flora. And when we do that, we compromise the body's ability to absorb nutrients from the good foods that we eat. So we start a cycle, an ever decreasing cycle of catastrophe. And a lot of my research looks at, well, what's the rate of that and what happens and how well can we repair it? And I'm very solution focused. I like to look at how we can give people things to improve their situation rather than just tell them what not to do, because people get sick to death of that. But the fact is the food has changed. It's changed in my lifetime. And, it's changed in all of our lifetimes. It's changed since 1948. Is when the big change started to come about. That was the birth, really, of the fast food industry, which is now worth £500 billion a year. They aggressively marketeer. There's a different advertisement going on somewhere, whether it's radio, TV, or internet, every 0.5 of a second. So you're getting bombarded by these messages all day, and they whistle tunes, and you know what the food is. So people find it really easy to make poor choices, and then they go to supermarkets and they're packed with ultra-processed foods. There is a point to this, because the point is that even when we try to make better choices, sometimes that's not as straightforward as it seems because of intensive agriculture and aquaculture. Even when we go to the fresh fruit aisle and the vegetable aisle and we make a selection, which, don't get me wrong, I want you to do that. That's better than the ones that are in tubs and wrapped up in plastic. The nutrient value of our food has changed over 70 years. Bear in mind, we've gone from a population in 1920 of 2 billion, and now we're at 7.7 billion. So we're dealing with a very different world in 100 years. So because of that, our food has counted the cost. And also there are multinational corporations who know they can make mega bucks out of food. So food has changed, attitudes towards food has changed, and health has changed dramatically. The biggest problem we have in Western industrialized worlds like the UK, America, Europe, Australia, is that we've got so used to sickness that it doesn't shock us anymore. So back when I was a child, let's just go as far back as 1977, that'll do for tonight. I remember a teacher giving us an assembly class and explaining to us that at some point in life, we would meet someone with cancer, because cancer statistics back then were 1 in 5. And we were told we will meet someone with cancer. It will happen. It's coming our way. Well, if you were born after 1960, that population, it's 1 in 2. 50% of those people will be diagnosed with a form of cancer. Currently in the UK, it's approximately 2 in 5. It's approaching halfway. It's approaching 1 in 2 as it is anyway, but it's definitely 2 in 5. It's beyond that, really. It's closer to 1 in 2. This isn't because we can detect things better. Earlier detection has led to some better, more successful treatments, which is more people get cancer now than they did in 1977. More people get cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome. More people are obese. Type 2 diabetes didn't occur in the UK to children until 2002. And now more and more diagnoses happen every single year. The rate of type 2 diabetes, which is purely a lifestyle disease, increases year on year. We are becoming an ever more sickness-orientated, sickness-centric society. And we see it everywhere so much, it doesn't shock us. I 100%, and I don't know most of the faces on here, and I would welcome you if you're a consultant, a surgeon, a GP. I work with all those people. I 100% guarantee you now that food is at the heart of the vast majority of those problems. And if we fix that, we can really dramatically improve health. So, cutting to the chase, what we're here for tonight. So, I'm actually not that mad on telling people to take supplements. I spend most of my time trying to get people to change their diet and make whole food choices and make better choices and change their behavior over time. But when it comes to omega-3, that's really difficult. And there's multiple reasons why it's difficult. One, you need 2 different types of food to get the full array of omega-3s. That's really important. So a lot of people will look at things like chia seeds and walnuts and flax seeds, and that's great. And I like people to do that. But that's one type of omega-3. The other 2 types come from fatty fish and marine algae and those kind of sources. And they're the ones that are really implicated in boosting our brain and restoring and bolstering our immune system. So these are vital to us, and they've almost got lost. We have diets that are it's so easy for us to get omega-6, and omega-6 is not a bad guy, but we get stacks of it. We get so much of it. It overwhelms whatever amount of omega-3 we've got, because it's hard to get from our diet. And the average person, certainly in the UK, doesn't eat that way. They don't eat fatty fish frequently enough, marine algae, seaweed, walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds. They just don't. They have a low prevalence in the UK diet. We meet people who have it, but they are the exception and they are not the rule. So when you're trying to get people to address this and put it into their diet, it's really hard, because you're trying to, one, make a whole stock change to how they eat. And then you have to say, and it's not as simple as that, because the bioavailability, the nutrient density that we need is really hard to get just from the diet. And what people have become accustomed to ever since the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way to present day, is a more product-led society. And they like things that are convenient. People have busy lives. You know, people are on the go more so than ever. What they want is to be able to make a positive change and get going, get started, start seeing the benefit. So why would you need to do this? Because I'm probably going to talk to you about something now that you might not have cropped up on your radar yet, but as a nutritionist and a physiologist, it's something that we're very aware of. And if you go and have a look at the research, if you go onto Google Scholar and type in these things, you'll see there are mountains of research. Every single person on this call, myself included, are a collection of cells. That's what we whittle down to. We are cells, billions of them, and they are replenishing and turning over morning, noon, and night. When you're a child and you're growing up and you're maturing, your cellular turnover is going like crazy. And then when we reach full maturation, which is around about age 21, things gradually start to slow down, and we call that next phase of life aging. And that's where we go from the vibrancy of youth and the cellular turnover, and it just starts to slowly go the other way. And we can see that in our skin, the lines on our face, you know, it's everywhere, because that cellular turnover is starting to slow down. You are a complex, amazing set of cells. So if something is wrong at a cellular level, then something is wrong with you. And you know this. Cancer is an illness, a disease of the cells. A proliferation of cancer cells is what leads to tumors and growths and a progression of that disease. So you know, whether you know it directly or not, that what happens at a cellular level is really, really vital and important. So how do we keep never mind looking at the big stuff, how do we keep that's what we're made of? How do we keep that in check? What happens at that level? Well, for optimal cell structure, level, health, wellness, we've, over 6.5 million years of evolution, 300,000 years in this current form as Homo sapien. We've evolved from living off the land, and that biodiversity of what we consumed, that changed 70 years ago. For thousands of years, we gradually brought about agriculture and progressive change, but dramatically it changed 70 years ago, and we're counting the cost. So at a cellular level, what's really important is that we have a good ratio of omega-6 and omega-3. They need to be in what we call balance so that they can do their job. And when they're doing their job, and the ratio we're looking for is about, less than 4 to 1. So 4 omega-6 to 1 omega-3. That's if we get there and beneath that, we're in great shape. That's where we want to be. When we're at that level, nutrients can get into the cell, toxins can get out of the cell. The cell itself remains nice and fluid and malleable and permeable. You know, it's a good textured cell, vibrant, active, doing its job. When it's not, when it's compromised, which we see a lot, it finds it hard to get nutrients in, finds it really hard to detoxify. So it holds that toxic in, becomes hard, becomes less malleable, moves less, and this is really poor shaped. It's only time before something else goes wrong with those types of cells. So what we know is if there's sufficient amounts of omega-3 in the diet, omega-3 gets prevalence, it's strong, it's a potent, it's what we call a polyunsaturated fatty acid, really strong omega-3, but there has to be enough of it for it to take first place over the omega-6. And when there is, well, then we transform the cell and we start to bring down inflammation. So this is really important that we understand this, because what's happening right now across most of the diets is that, you know, most people are getting loads of omega-6 and nowhere near enough omega-3. So it starts to become a bit of an issue. So we're going to zoom straight in now to this product here. Back in April, a friend of mine rings me up and says, "Col, will you have a look at this? It's a product. I think it's going to help me." He'd had some health issues over the years, and only because it was him and it was a friend, I get asked to look at a lot of product. I thought, okay, I'll have a look. And funnily enough, I was actually working on a project just then that was epigenetics, and I was looking at this relationship. So this was the first time I heard of Zinzino. And if I'm honest with you, I was skeptical. I always am. And I thought, right, I'll have a look at what they're saying this product does. So going through that step by step, my first question is, the fish oil industry is underserving everyone. There's not enough omega-3 in it. They expose it to the air. It gets destroyed by the heat of the body when we try to digest it. So is it more of that? Well, actually it wasn't, and it isn't. It's a much more intelligent product. And the reason being is the team of scientists they have working at Zinzino are the real deal. And they've done all their due diligence and intelligence, and they've designed a really intelligent product. So why is it intelligent? Well, first of all, this is vital, they take a polyphenol from olive oil. That's really important because the polyphenol protects the omega-3 from air and from the heat of the body when we try to ingest it. So that's vital. But also the polyphenol acts as an anti-inflammatory. Most people in the UK are walking around with systemic inflammation. Their body feels like it's in a viral condition for most of the time because they eat too much sugar, they don't move enough, they eat a lot of processed foods. And this creates systemic inflammation. So they're in a state of inflammation a lot, most of the time. So something like a polyphenol from the olive oil, and you've all heard of olive oil. We tell you to consume olive oil all the time. Well, that goes to work. It's protecting, it's a chaperone to the omega-3, and it starts to bring about a reduction in inflammation. So now the omega-3 makes it to the stomach and starts to get out to the cells. So this is really important now. So the chaperone, the polyphenol's done its job. Now the omega-3 goes to work within the cell. And what it starts to do is, again, reduce the inflammation in the cell. It blocks what we call pro-inflammatory markers. So it stops further inflammation. And it starts to make that cell membrane more malleable. And by doing that, it allows more nutrients in and toxins out. So the omega-3 is really powerful. The omega-6 is important as well. But within the balance oil, we've got polyphenol, we've got omega-3. There's also some omega-9, which again is another polyunsaturated fatty acid. And quite vitally, there is vitamin D3. For the past 20 years, the only supplement I've told everyone in the UK to take on a daily basis is vitamin D3. Because we don't get enough exposure to light, we don't get direct sunlight, we don't get enough vitamin D through our diet. So we will all benefit from vitamin D3. The benefits of vitamin D3 on our immune system are profound and well recognized and applauded. We encourage it left, right, and center. In the United States, they reported that 96% of the cases of worst, most severe symptoms of COVID-19 were shown to have a deficiency in vitamin D. So we know that it's directly correlated towards our immune system and our overall health and our risk regarding certain chronic illnesses and disease. So all of this is in this product, is in what they call the balance oil. So I thought this is pretty compelling stuff. This is leagues ahead of a fish oil supplement. And then I noticed that they have the Trondheim test. So they do a dry blood test, and it's a bit like a type 2 diabetes test, where it's retrospective. So it takes an average of your blood lipid profile from the past 3 months. So you prick your finger, you send it off, they test it, and they tell you lots of information, to be honest with you. But the key thing they tell you is your ratio between omega-6 and 3, and whether or not you're in balance or how far out of balance you are. And remember, the golden range is to be 4 to 1 or less. If we can get down to 2 to 1, 1 to 1, there's some really interesting research that looks specifically at things like colon cancer that suggests that when we're at that state cellularly, it's really hard for cancer to get going and do what cancer does. I work a lot in cancer, and I'm not going to say to you that it makes you immune to cancer, because that would be ridiculous. But what we do know is that when a human body's cellular balance is at that level, specific types of cancer find it really difficult to grow and do what they like to do. So this is really compelling for a researcher like me and a nutritionist. So the first question I ask is, would I have nothing to do with the company centrally, would I recommend this to my family, to my friends, to the individuals in my care, and to the athletes I work with? And if we can pass those 4, then it's something that I'd recommend to anyone. And it passes all those 4, to the extent, funny enough, my wife is just starting to take it now. So we did the dry blood test on my wife, and hers was higher than we'd like it to be. So straight away, she's going to start taking it. So to me, what you've got has been a long time coming. We're in the 21st century, and finally, food companies are starting to show some level of ethical responsibility and duty of care, and making intelligent products that genuinely improve the health of people who consume it, because they're addressing a real world problem. Is that this is missing from the diet. This is really hard to get in the diet because of a whole host of reasons. And now we've got an opportunity where we can test, we can see how close you are or how far off an individual is to the required ratio. You start to take the balance oil, and the amount you take is based on your body weight and your gender, which also makes sense, because you'll see daily guidelines and recommended guidelines. Incidentally, the daily guidelines need updating in the UK and the US with regards to omega-3. They should be nearly double what is currently being recommended. People don't consume enough. We don't store these things for long enough. So people need to consume more of it on a daily basis. So taking the balance oil based on your body mass and gender makes perfect sense. So there's a specific dose that's related to you. You take it for 3 months, and then you do a second test to see how effective it's been. And like I said, it goes off to a genetics lab in Norway. It's the Trondheim test, which was established best part of 20 years ago. And you find out how much impact that it's having on your cellular balance. Powerful stuff. Some of the tests, I'm not really big on anecdotes and testimony, but in the short time, the past few months that, I've been seeing what Jay and the guys have been up to and where this has gone, and hearing back from people as to the impact it's had with regards to the impact on people's ADHD, on, skin conditions, multiple things. It's profound. And to me, it makes sense at a cellular level, at a biological level, because you can't put those things right if the foundations aren't in place. And the foundations of us are cells. That's what we are. Ultimately, if you live the best life, the healthiest life, the longest life, illness-free, What you will die of is when that tipping point of cellular turnover and cellular death reaches a critical moment. And that's when we all exit, check out, and go. That's how finally balanced our existence is, based on cellular health and wellness. That's what we are. We can track things like the difference between your chronological age, so the year you were born to what date it is now, versus your biological age, so the state of your vital organs, the cells, the skin. And this ratio is not only implicated, it's a vital part of that. Everyone who's, let's say, 30 years old should have a maximum age, biological age, of 30. Ideally, you'd like your biological age to be a few years less. The truth is, in the UK, the reason why people are getting cardiovascular disease now in their mid-30s, cancers in the 20s, type 2 diabetes in their 20s, the reason why these are no longer considered diseases of old people is because our biological age, on average in the UK, is far older than our chronological age. So we're dealing with people who are 30 with regards to their birth certificate, but biologically, they're nearly 50 because their cells, because of a lack of activity, maybe they smoke, drink too much, eat a lot of processed food, all these things, these lifestyle factors, these epigenetics start to stack up, and it takes its toll on us. We are a biological creature. We exist on a biosphere. We are tapped in to the health of this. And this isn't mumbo jumbo stuff. I'm not one of those types of people. So this is the reality of it. So this product, I know there's been a few questions in the chat. I'll have a look at those in a minute if you don't mind. But to preempt some, the first thing that people will ask, and I asked this a long time ago, which is, well, surely you have to reduce omega-6, the foods that contain that, and then increase omega-3. And there's a logic to that, but there's a difference between what we call exogenous and endogenous ratios. Exogenous are the things that we eat. Endogenous is what happens within the body from those things. And what we know is that actually, as long as there's sufficient amount of omega-3, then it takes priority within the cell. So it's at that stage, it's less about all these omega-6s and more the fact that there's enough omega-3 for it to take its place in the queue and get priority. And then it controls the cell, because these things are all fighting for the same enzymes. Without getting into full-on physiology 101, these things are fighting for the same enzymes. And when there's enough of the omega-3, that gets first shout, runs with it, does what it needs to do, and pretty much tells omega-6 and omega-9 what they need to do. So that's how it works on that. Would a person be better off for looking at how they can reduce their omega-6? It's definitely worth considering. But for now, what I would encourage anyone to do, because we sustain change better when we change very little. So if we can just change one thing at a time and start to put our health in a more advantageous position, we build on success. So what I encourage everyone to do is do one thing that you know you can be successful at and see how far that success takes you. So when people ask me, well, how should I bring in these omega-6s and increase the omega-3s? What I've been saying now for months is pause that thought, start to take the balance, do the test, start to take the balance oil, retest in 3 months. Let's see what's changed with the ratio. Let's see if we're closer to balance, if not imbalance. Over 90% of people who do that typically find they are imbalanced within that time. And then we can start to look at other meaningful changes that we can make to the diet and other nutritional strategies you can bring in. Zinzino themselves have other products that, that bolster around this, that have things that with regards to, increasing, vitamin D. There are things that are looking at, controlling mood state, helping with sleep. And everything I've looked at stacks up. Again, intelligently thought of, well-designed, cleanly manufactured products that address real-world health issues. So on that note, let me have a look in the chat room, see if there's anything I need to do. How much fish would someone need to eat to what type of omega-3? Mark, that's a really good question as to how much fish. And I'm going to give you a lame answer, but I'm going to explain why it's lame. Because we don't, right back at the start, what I tried to explain is that we don't know the nutritional value of the fish. So if it's wild line caught salmon, then we can start to look at how much, you know, omega-3 should be in that based on its size and its age and maturity. The fact is, most of the fatty fish, the salmon, the mackerel, that is consumed across the counter in the UK is farmed versions. And then there's a whole host of where they've been farmed, the sea algae ratio in diet, the intense aquaculture. So this is why it becomes really difficult, because with the best will in the world of trying to go in and make an informed choice and saying, well, I'm not going to have those ones in a packet, I'm going to go for the fresh. It's not even as simple as that anymore. And we've got to recognize that until those procedures dramatically change, if they ever will, we are going to have to live in a modern world with modern strategies and think about how we can improve our health. So what I would encourage you to do, because I'm convinced, you know, I work in education. I work at, you know, master's level and PhD level. The more we take on ourselves and we empower ourselves, the longer we retain the information. Have a look at existing guidelines for daily intake. Have a look at what's being broadcast for the UK. And I promise you, the reality, if you look at the studies and the research, is pretty much double that. So go and have it in your own time. Take some time to have a look. You should always do your due diligence anyway, but you'll be amazed. And this is not new. I've been doing this for a quarter of a century, it occurred to me today. This is not new. We've been fighting against aggressive marketing campaigns from multinational corporations. We've been fighting against every single political regime that comes in that has their own health agenda. You're trying to get clear messages through to people to demystify the situation, and it's really hard. Interestingly, it's interesting to me anyway, if you have a look at Brazil, they've set about this 10 steps to health, and the top 3 are all about reducing processed and ultra-processed foods and being cautious with regards to advertising. When you listen to a company advertise your food, isn't that interesting? Their ratio of obesity in Brazil is 19%. If you look at the US, just up the way there, theirs is 39%. So, you know, messaging and those decisions are vital, crucial, vital. Can the balance oil alone help with sleep apnea, or would you need to combine it with a viable product as well? So sleep apnea is a side issue. I've done a lot of work on this because I've worked in sleep clinics. So first thing we do, and you'll know this, Robert, is that if you are at all overweight, a GP, a specialist, someone like me will say to you, we need to lose some weight, because that's one of the biggest things implicated with regards to sleep apnea. If you're not, then we start to look at other things around synapse activity, neurological behavior, particularly across the brain. So the balance oil, I'd say, is a good start for anyone. For anyone is the balance oil, because that's going to address a cellular level. With regards to sleep, and I promise you I'm not a product guy, but let me have a look 2 seconds, because they've got a great product, which let me tell you now what it is, unless someone else jumps in ahead of me, which happens a lot. Let me tell you, we've got a really good product. Right. Trying to get you the right one now. Which is the one? Viva with saffron and B vitamins. These are the kind of things that you want to consider that are going to help with that kind of overcoming inhibitory factors. However, don't need to answer and ask anything to me. See, I knew Jay getting before me, Viva. If weight is an issue, and I know people get sick to hearing that, but it's true. I promise you it's true. Obesity is an issue across the board. You know, Boris Johnson's now talked about the obesity campaign. Incidentally, the previous government spent 75 million on the exact same campaign. They've pledged 10 million. As a nation, we need to address obesity. We know that it's implicated in so many things. It's lighting the fuse to chronic disease. So all I'd say to you, Robert, is if weight is at all an issue, make sure you address that. The Viva will likely help. The Balancer will definitely help, because if you're fixing things at a cellular level and then start to build on that success. For an athlete, have I missed one? No. For an athlete, what impact would more balanced 3-6 ratio make to their performance? Not necessarily, that's a great question there. Not necessarily to their performance, but to their recovery. And recovery is everything. I've been an S&C coach. I'm very proud to have been an S&C coach at the highest level, Olympic athletes, international rugby athletes, football, and beyond that, in my opinion. You know, I've trained people to get to the world stage in Ironman, triathlon, the whole hit. Recovery is everything. Exercise stimulus, we can be really clever about that and do the right kind of training. All good. If your recovery doesn't match it, if the person, the athlete's not primed to recover and adapt, then it's just a flogging for no purpose. Recovery is everything. Recovery and restoration. And that's where it comes in. Because if we're optimized at a cellular level, we can recover better. And if we can recover better, we can adapt better. And if we can recover and adapt, we can get fitter, we can consolidate those changes, and we can move on to the next. Hopefully that helped that one. Good question though. Do you know why Zinzino used the synthetic version of ingredients in their products, such as folic acid? That's a really good question. So there's non-synthetic synthetics. I know what you mean. I know what you mean by the use of the word synthetic. An even less favorable word, but maybe a more accurate word, is pharmaceutical grade or equivalent of something like folic acid. The olive oil is taken direct from. But regards to that, this is typically down to mass required and the regulation around how those things are enriched to a product. And remember, there are different types of processing, from ultra processed, which are things like Kentucky Fried Mutant, McDonald's, all the way through to something that's just been prepared in a certain way to make it consumable. So processing covers a broad term, and we tell people to avoid the ultra processed and moderately processed. And processing procedures are changed. Processing foods is with us forever, because we've now got 7.7 billion people on the planet, and the prediction is by 2026 that's going to be 8 billion people. So in 100 years we will have quadrupled the population on the planet. So these industries are with us for life. What we've got to do is make better use of them, more ethical use. And we understand those things better now. So we should be able to do it and should be doing that. So where you see something like synthetic or pharmaceutical grade folic acid, I will be less concerned than when we start to see things like stabilizers, enrichers, and those kind of agents. But it's a good question. People are losing weight on this product. Do you know why? It's a really good question. So did I say that loud enough? So the question is, people are losing weight. Do we know why they're losing weight? Wow. Where do we go with that? One of the reasons why, I'll tell you what I'll do. One of the reasons why people gain weight. So when you eat refined carbohydrates and sugar, we get a spike of insulin. And that insulin spike is to take that carbohydrate, that sugar, into the cell. And the cell would try and spend that as energy. But in order for it to do that fully, those insulin levels have to come right back down. So again, we're discussing something at a cellular level. Frequent spikes, which we see a lot of in average UK people, means that insulin goes high, the cells bring in this glycogen, glucose for energy, and they're waiting for the insulin to go back down or something to happen, like running, doing a gym session, to spend this energy. And anything it doesn't spend because the insulin doesn't come down or the activity is not enough gets stored as fat. So this is one of the ways in which people gain weight. Obviously, another way is people eating too much food, so excessive calorie consumption. The reason I explained the first one is that when we see things at a cellular level, if you remember maybe half an hour ago, when a cell is optimized for health, it's great to get nutrients in and it's great to get toxins out. So the cell behaves better. When we are more nutritionally served, rather than calorifically served, we typically have more stabilized energy. So we rely less on energy hits. That typically means that we start to consume less. So we break the day up with less snacking behavior. I think that's one of the mechanisms behind it. We've got a cell that's in better shape. The impulse to the brain to feed that is less because more of the nutrients are getting in and the toxins are getting out. And we've got a more stabilized energy environment. But there's so many other ways we can come at it from that as well. But that's one of the mechanisms in it. It's important to notice, though, that a lot of people do report that. A lot of people do report that. Tonight they mentioned on the news about pain meds being used too much for chronic pain. Yeah, absolutely. People just live on tablets. You know what's really bizarre, folks? I don't know what your background is and what you do for a living. I get to go in to businesses all over the country. I'm part of this like wellness campaign. I'm really fortunate. I get to speak direct to people across all manner of businesses. And I know firsthand, the average person leaves for work carrying paracetamol and ibuprofen. So the average person has normalized that behavior, that they think it's fine to expect pain that requires medication on a daily basis. And if they haven't got some on themselves, they'd be dead comfortable saying, who have we got on here? Hey up, Mark, have you got any paracetamol on you? I've got a headache. And Mark wouldn't go, what? You need pain medication? What's going on? Mark would just go, I'll have a look at my bag. And then go, well, what's up? Bit of a headache. And that's normalized. Normalized. Back pain, joint pain. And then a load of mythology comes around it, don't they? Oh, I've done my knees in because of all that running. It's nonsense. 100% promise you. If you're running well and you're running right, then your knees should be getting stronger and stronger if you're doing it properly. The fact is poor nutrition is stripping our vitality away and it's leaving our nerves raw. So people are strung out on pain meds, anti-inflammatory. Why are so many people taking anti-inflammatories? When COVID-19 kicked in and the first advice was anti-inflammatories don't do you any good, the racks were big. And people weren't buying that for COVID-19. They were buying that because they usually rely on it and they want to make sure that they didn't run out of their supply. So yeah, it's huge. We've got to get people off over-the-counter medications. It's not normal. How did we evolve for 6.5 million years? How did we get here? We've normalized this to the extent that we just think it's acceptable, and it's not. It's a clear indication of an unhealthy society. I'm genuinely trying to think of the last time I took a pain medication. I got knocked off my bike in 2015, and I did some damage to the shoulder and bust a few ribs. And I think I took a couple of paracetamol for a couple of days. You know, we shouldn't. It's just wrong. You know, you should struggle to remember the last time you took pain meds. Also, we're hearing about, and by the way, ibuprofen damages your stomach like you would not believe. You've got to be careful how much you rely on that stuff. But allergies such as hay fever and not being so badly affected. Also, we're hearing about people with allergies such as hay fever not being so badly affected. Take medication to manage the hay fever and they get in a cycle of that. That doesn't make sense. It genuinely doesn't make sense unless something dramatically changes in the areas that you live as to why you'd be susceptible to seasonal issues regarding hay fever. So again, if the cell is in better health, then that should occur less, because the cell being in better health starts to change things systemically within the body. How do they help autism in children and Asperger's? You know, that's a huge one. Autism and Asperger's, with regards to their diagnoses, are on the increase, and there's multiple reasons regarding why that is. And I'm sure if there were specialists in that area on this call tonight, we could have a fascinating chat about why that might be. But again, what I will say is particularly as we are developing from adolescence as children, you know, literally the quality of what we consume and eat is setting the blueprint for the adults we are going to become. And it's writing the DNA through a gene expression with regards to what we are in the there and then as we're becoming where we're going. So I'm not overly familiar. My familiarity with the research centers more upon cardiovascular disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome. I'm not overly familiar with the research in the area with regards to omega-3, cell balance, autism and Asperger's. But again, I can only emphasize it, or I can't emphasize it enough. When the body is in cellular balance, then we have an optimized platform for health, because that's where the body should be. That is pressing reset. That is biologically getting us back to where we're meant to be and letting us go again, wiping the slate clean. So I would imagine its impact, you know, because we're talking about brain tissue replenishment, and brain tissue acts on, brain function acts on two things, which is the amount of mass of brain tissue and the electrical activity. And remember, electrical activity requires a conductor, and things that disrupt the conduction delay the procedure. So they could be things, because again, if the cell is not optimized, there's a delay in the procedure. These questions are coming through so thick and fast now. And guys, I've got literally 9 minutes left, so I will do my best to get through a few more. Do you also know how the science company or scientist behind Zinzino from Bethany? Do I know them? Not personally, but I know them by reputation, which is outstanding. The main one I talked to you about is Professor Paul Clayton, internationally regarded nutritionalist long before I could even spell nutrition. Based at University of Oxford, has worked on projects all over the country and all over the world. And if you have a look, the Scientific Advisory Board are on the website, and we are talking about legitimate big hitters, researchers who've informed the product development. Show me the equivalent in another company. And I don't say that as a challenge. I would welcome that. If more companies did this, if more companies brought on board the experts and actually use them to influence the product and how it's going to function, imagine the world we'd have. Imagine the world we'd have. So yeah, absolutely. Genuine, checked, full-on pedigree, researchers, academics, real deal. Let's have a look. Can they help with nerve pains? So can they help with nerve pains with regards to the balance oil? Again, I'm going to repeat a lot. It's about bringing things back to a cellular level. There are other products that they have with regards to, you know, supporting the immune system. Remember, when we're more optimized from a cellular level, then we're in a better position. We've put ourselves in a more advanced position with regards to the preservation and development of our overall systemic health. So again, sciatica. Sciatica is not really a condition. It's a description of a pain that relates to the sciatic nerve. It starts at the top of your head and goes right down to the heel of your foot and goes through the spinal cord. Typically where people experience their sciatica is where it exits the lumbar region and goes down the left and right branch of the legs. So they'll get pain in and around that area. It's not a condition. No one has sciatica. They express sciatic pain symptoms. And again, everything from the level of hydration, so how much water you've drunk, your movement, your posture, and 100% your cellular integrity play a part in that. Right, I'm going to answer two more. I'm sure Elle has already answered one. I've seen massive improvement on 3 children. They've all had ADHD. And the cognitive behavior, they seem more relaxed. We haven't got time to get into ADHD and nutrition, but what I will say is that the first person who ever determined and described ADHD and made it a diagnosable condition said, this is a nutritional issue, not a medical issue. Harvard have had a research study going on for a couple of years now, where they are only treating ADHD through nutritional means. And as a part of those means, it's looking at things such as omega balance, and they've had 100% success rate. So taking children off medication through nutritional interventions. So that's not a surprise to me whatsoever. More and more people need to switch on to that. The same way as more people switching on to the fact that they can reverse their type 2 diabetes with lifestyle changes, move more and eat better. The same is true of ADHD. How will these products get people off pharma drugs from their government-controlled doctor? Wow, Mark, there's a hand grenade. Great question. You know why? Because people, or how? It's not going to happen overnight, Mark. But people like me need to start making bolder statements and telling the truth. You know, pharma make a lot of foods, and then when you get the disease related to the food, they sell you the medication. So they've got you for life. You're a consumer for life. And the minute you say that, someone says you're a conspiracy theorist, because the mantra, the central mantra, is that we all subscribe to, oh no, it's this and it's that and all the rest of it. And anyone who deviates left or right, you know, you get hung up to dry. But life's too short and people's lives matter. So more of us need to take that battle on. I'm more than comfortable with taking it on. Don't really care. They're wrong, immoral. They are stripping people of the quality of life. So we've just got to do it by taking the bull by the horns, Mark, and having conversations like this and talking to people about the real factors of health that matter and deflecting the nonsense.
So thanks for that, Colin. And I think everyone on the call really appreciates the standard of education that you've just gave everyone. So if, like me, you were really interested to want to know more about the business, then please go back to the person who introduced you or invited you this evening. Okay, speak to you all soon. Bye.